This is the Crowd Crux Crowdfunding Podcast with Sal Brigman, where we cover everything you need to know to launch a successful crowdfunding campaign. We speak with proven entrepreneurs who've raised money from the crowd and want to teach you how to do the same. Stay tuned because we're about to reveal how to launch your dream project. With your host, Sal Brigman.
What up? Salvador Brigman here, and thank you for listening to the Crowdfunding Demystified podcast. I have a great interview-style episode for you today, but before we get into that, I just want to mention that if you are interested in getting into the media, you're interested in getting a media hit, you're interested in having reporters and journalists writing about you, I now have a free course out in how to get into the media and also how to smash your goal on Kickstarter and raise far more than you actually anticipated. So if you want to check that out, that free course, you can go to crowdcrux.com/PR. That is crowdcrux.com/PR. And once you enter your email address, you will start getting emails from me, some really great videos that I put together for you, and then we'll sort of introduce you to this entire concept and a lot of different ways that you can get the word out about your upcoming Kickstarter or IndieGoGo campaign. Today's interview is really exciting because we brought on another expert in the crowdfunding community who is the host of the Prelaunch podcast. And this person also has run several successful Kickstarter campaigns, a lot of them. He's raised over 6 figures on Kickstarter, and he also runs a small press comic book, graphic novels, and children's book imprint called Comics Tribe. So he's done a lot, particularly in the creative genre and with comic books and with that type of category. And also his podcast goes into a lot of these different topics as well. This is Tyler James, the host of Comics Launch. So in our interview, I think that I really tried to get for you guys some nuggets of gold. I really pressed him with some of my questions. We were laughing after the podcast. I really tried to get some very straight answers out of him when it comes to what is the formula that he uses to successfully launch these various projects. His project, which is live right now, raised $21,000 in 24 hours. So he's had a lot of success. He knows exactly what you need to do if you want to successfully raise money on Kickstarter, and he shares all of that on this podcast episode. I think that you're going to like it a lot. Without further ado, let's get to today's podcast episode. Tyler, welcome to the podcast. How you doing, man?
Hey, Sal, I'm doing great today. How are you doing?
Pretty cool. Where exactly are you hailing in from? Is it Massachusetts?
Yep, Massachusetts. I'm from a city called Newburyport, Mass. It's on the North Shore, about 45 minutes north of Boston.
I know exactly where that is. So I actually grew up in Massachusetts around like Westford, Mass, Concord, around that area.
Yep. Yeah. I'm a bit of a transplant. I grew up in Albany, New York, but I've been in Massachusetts for about a decade now. So sort of Yankee fan in Red Sox country is always fun.
See, I'm the opposite because I'm in New York now, and I grew up as a Red Sox fan, and now I'm here. So it's always scary if you go to a bar, they have that on TV for that to be.
Yeah. Well, gotta make sure you're walking into the right joint, or you might not walk out.
Right. I was in Plymouth for the last week. My parents just got a house there. So yeah, I love Mass. It's just a great, especially in the summer. It's really beautiful if you go to any of the beaches there, etc. And I had a great time just growing up there, experiencing all of that. Are you a Masshole? Would you consider yourself that yet?
No, I don't have the accent. Every once in a while, I will actually catch myself, dropping my eyes or something like that. And I'm like, oh my God, what has happened?
Wicked cool, right?
Yeah. And my wife is actually from Massachusetts. She was born and raised. And so it's always funny whenever, she's had an adult beverage or two and the accent
it comes out.
Yeah.
That's so funny. It's a small world. I've been watching your work from afar for a while now. You're doing a great job with the podcast, all of the education that you have out there. And you've also just done a great job on Kickstarter. I mean, you've raised over 6 figures with, I think it's 3 campaigns. And your recent one, it just hit, what was it, $21,000 in the first 24 hours?
It's been crazy, and it's been a whirlwind. And actually, this is now the 11th campaign that I've been managing over the course of the past 5.5 years. And so we've sort of done a couple of different brands and a couple of different niches using the Kickstarter platform and partnering with creators to launch Kickstarter. And so it's been quite the journey, and it's a long ways away from the first book that I ever released, which was a copy of a comic book that I printed at my stepfather's florist in the office. I used his photocopy machine and sold it out of my backpack in high school at about age 14. Sold about 10 copies at $1 a piece. So to now have raised, over $250,000 in crowdfunding on multiple projects and gotten, tons of books out there and just the support of all these amazing backers over the past, really the past 5-6 years. It's been quite a journey and quite an experience. And I love talking about it because because I think we're living in an amazing time for the independent creators and entrepreneurs.
That is insane. What actually draws you to the comic book? I mean, I know for me personally, when I was that age, I was really into writing. I was really into fiction and also just writing and blogging and stuff like that. What actually drew you to comic books at that age?
It's funny. My mom used to tell me, as I got a little older, she used to tell me that she was really worried when I was really young, because she was worried about what would happen when I discovered that I couldn't actually be a superhero when I grew up. And every day it would be a different superhero, right? It's like Mondays, I'm Spider-Man, Tuesdays, Superman, Wednesdays, I'm Batman. At preschool, she used to tell me every single day, I went to a Montessori preschool where they're very open and about letting you choose your activities. Well, I chose the same activity just about every single day, and that was making a Batman utility belt. And so she still has saved these Batman utility belts from way back when. And so eventually I did realize that I could not actually be a comic book superhero when I grew up, but I discovered that I could actually create them. And so I think, some of that stuff has stuck with me. And there was, for anybody that's listening, and I know you get a broad audience of from everything from the tech space to writers and artists and creators and publishers. And so, growing up, I really took the creative side of things seriously in the early 90s when 5 of the top talent from Marvel Comics all left at the same time to sort of branch out on their own and create a brand new universe. And this was sort of the start of Image Comics, which is now 25 years of publishing. But basically that hit me at a really influential time in my preteens and early teens, seeing these people just coming out of nowhere and creating a whole new universe from scratch. I think when you think about it, like Superman, Batman, Spider-Man, those things had just always sort of existed. But when these creators went out and founded Image Comics, it showed me how this stuff didn't just exist. These were created, and the creators behind them made these things happen. And that was just a light bulb moment. And it didn't take much to see these young guys going off on their own, launching their own creations and creative lines, for me to want to go from just a consumer of the comic stuff to actually creating it. And so I've been creating since high school and haven't really looked back.
Just to put it on the record here, I also still plan to be a Starship or a Star Trek Enterprise captain when I'm older. It's still something I want to do. I was really into Star Trek when I was younger, also like superheroes and all of that kind of stuff. When you sort of dig into a lot of the actual entrepreneurs out there, like Elon Musk, if you listen to some of his interviews, he will say just the drastic way in which comic books actually influenced his own career. Him wanting to sort of embody these various characters that he looked up to. And sort of he is now. He's saving the world with like Tesla and all of the different things he's doing, like SpaceX. So it's very influential in that way.
Yeah, and comics. I mean, it's still compared to music and TV and film. It's a small market, it's a niche market. But I still like to say that if you want to see where pop culture is going to be 5 years from now, all you need to do is go to a comic book shop and now go on Kickstarter, because there are there's people looking at Kickstarter projects and successful Kickstarter projects as properties down the line. I mean, Walking Dead which is one of the biggest shows on television. Hey, that was in comic books for years prior to making the jump to TV. And it seems like every couple of months there's a new comic book property that's being adapted to either television or film. And so and I think part of that is because we don't need $1 million budgets to make things happen. And if you, I know you're somebody that that loves the creative side and the passion behind projects, but you also love the numbers and love watching things make sense. And one of the things that's interesting, and I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but over the past year and a half, 2 years that I've really been sort of watching, and particularly Kickstarter, the Kickstarter success rate has actually gone down over the past year and a half in terms of projects. Comics has been an outlier, though. The comic space has actually gone up by about 2.5%. And in that same time, the time since I've been, it's also the time that I've been podcasting, and I don't take credit for that, but it's a nice coincidence, right?
Do you think there's even then any sort of time you should spend looking at IndieGoGo, or is Kickstarter where it's at?
Yeah, so I think for comics, the Kickstarter is the play for comic books. Now, I had on the podcast a few months ago a creator come in and make the case for IndieGoGo and launching on IndieGoGo, but the market is just so much bigger on Kickstarter for the comic space than it is on IndieGoGo. And as you know, and as you've discussed on your show, there are benefits or things that work or that IndieGoGo has that Kickstarter doesn't. Things like flexible funding, things like the post campaign things that they do. All that said, I think part of the special sauce of Kickstarter is some of those things that IndieGoGo sort of trumps up as what's differentiating. The fact that you don't have to hit your funding goal to get money. Well, I think that actually works against creators' advantages on a platform like IndieGoGo, and is actually part of the reason why Kickstarter is a much better deal, is because if you only raise half of what you need to do your large print run on an IndieGoGo, well, you can't do that print run. It is kind of an all or nothing, and then either your backers are in the lurch or you're in the lurch. So I do think Kickstarter protects creators from taking on more than they should if they haven't built up an audience to actually succeed. So, I'm not sure who said it, but money is a truth serum is a great quote I love. And getting funded is good validation that it's time to get this work out there.
How would you say that from your very first project, and I think you said this was about 5 years ago, how would you say your concept of crowdfunding has changed since then? As you've gone with these various projects that you yourself have launched, and also the campaigns that you've worked on, how has your understanding of crowdfunding changed?
Yeah, that's a great question. And, I'm sure your listenership is a lot like my listenership in that you get a lot of people listening, but it always surprises me that 70% of my listeners, because I survey them and I talk to them on a regular basis, 70% of them still haven't launched their first crowdfunding campaign. 70%. And these are people, and I'm sure, I'm not sure if you've asked that question or if you've gotten response rates, but I'm willing to bet there's a lot of people listening to this right now that haven't launched their first crowdfunding. And they might have been listening to you for months or even years. And I know you've done all you can to sort of get them over that hump, but there's still a lot of barriers there. But one of the biggest barriers for me, and the thing that kept me on the sideline and studying Kickstarter and paying attention and spinning my wheels, but not launching for over a year and a half, was the fact that I was looking at Kickstarter as sort of a one-time play, right? I was looking at it not as a renewable resource, but basically, like a card that you could play. I get to play this Kickstarter card once and launch to my audience, and that's it. And so, I get this one shot to make it count. So I would dismiss smaller projects and smaller projects and smaller projects as not being Kickstarter worthy or big enough, et cetera. And so when I actually did launch, it was for the biggest project that I had ever taken on. It was a hardcover anthology project, and it was successful. We were looking for $8,500. We raised $26,000, which blew my mind at the time and was more than I had raised the last 3 years combined, going to comic book conventions and trying to sell a few books here and there online and trying to ask retailers to stock my book. So just in that one-shot campaign, everything freaking changed. And that also essentially kickstarted a snowball that allowed us to sort of use that funding to really launch and continue to expand our the publishing line that it helped support. But what I realized shortly after launching was that if I do an awesome campaign, if I treat my backers with respect, if I make it an event for them, if I deliver on the promises and over deliver in some cases, well, they're not going to be saying, okay, you played your card. Good luck with the rest of your career off Kickstarter. They're going to be saying things like, hey, when's the next campaign? And so it really showed me that whether Kickstarter is a renewable resource or not is entirely up to you, the creator, and how you use the platform.
So it's something you can almost make a career out of. If you've built and established these relationships with these people and you've launched multiple campaigns, they're seeing you fulfill the rewards. This is something it seems like you've almost made into a career.
Well, yeah. I mean, I'm a big fan of encouraging creators to get out of this or that mentality and try to take this and that mentality, right? Like, so it's not, do you do Kickstarter or do you try to go through Diamond and get into the direct market, or do you try to get into Barnes & Noble, or do you try to sell ebooks on Kindle? It's like have success one spot and then expand to other platforms, because the reality is, and anyone that's actually launched a Kickstarter campaign, and I mean, we raised for the last campaign that I just did for Sweet Dreams Cthulhu, which is a children's book, we raised over $21,000 in the first 24 hours, and we're, I think, close to $25,000 right now here on halfway into day 2. But that's not $25,000 going directly into our pockets, and it's very easy to spend that money. And so where Kickstarter really gets powerful is when it actually does what it was intended to do, not be the entire business, because we're going to run this campaign. It's going to run for 30 days, but there's the rest of the life of this product to think about as well. But Kickstarter really helps you get that juice, that momentum, and can springboard you and makes other areas of your business model more profitable. Because when this Kickstarter's over, I now have convention stock, so that I can go to conventions and sell extra copies of the book there, copies that I didn't have to go out of pocket for because I looped them into the Kickstarter print run. So that makes conventions more lucrative. I can take these books and I can solicit them in the direct market and get them into the 2,000 plus comic book shops that the Diamond distributor services. I can put them on Amazon and I can sell them there. I can create digital versions and upsells. We can merchandise. So there's all these, and then you can even stack campaigns upon one another so that you are building upon what you've established early on.
Wow.
So within the C is for Cthulhu brand, which is one of the brands that I managed, and in a very short time, we were able to create essentially a 6-figure a year children's book brand from scratch in just a short time. But we did that by building an audience, launching on Kickstarter, and then continuing to add elements to the channel. So online store, Shopify, Amazon, and then coming back to Kickstarter and stacking. That's
crazy. You are literally blowing my mind right now. Like all the ideas that are just popping up, ways that you can leverage this campaign. Like I think this is really incredible, and it's almost kind of overwhelming, but it seems like the way that you've approached it, you sort of tackled one of these one after the other. You're not trying to do them all at the same time. It's like one after the other. And I'm sure we're throwing around numbers here, like $24,000. We're just throwing around these numbers. How exactly are you doing this? Like how the heck are you hitting your goal so soon? I had to interrupt this podcast episode because I want to introduce you to my friends at The Gadget Flow. Their product discovery platform reaches 22 million people per month. They've helped more than 5,000 crowdfunding campaigns thus far, and they have a social media following of more than 700,000 followers. If you want to gain access to their marketplace and list your own product, you can go to thegadgetflow.com/submit and list your project today.
Yeah, and believe me, for those of you guys listening that are just like, I'm trying to make my first $100 here. I get it. Like I said, $9. My first comic book sold $9, and prior to that first Kickstarter launch, the only way I was selling comics really was I had two options, right? I could go to conventions, and when you go to conventions, you have to obviously create all of that product in advance. So you're going into the hole there, and you got to buy your table, and then you got to hope that that enough people show up and enough people are interested in what you're selling that you can make a few sales to recover the money that you've already spent, and then ideally make a profit. And then the other option was to sell directly to retailers, and retailers take 50% off the cover, and a lot of them only buy on consignment, which means they'll take your book, they'll put it on their shelves, but they'll only pay you if it actually sells, and you have to go back there to sort of collect. And so to be able to jump in and launch a Kickstarter and do something where backers are pre-ordering this stuff, and it was a total game changer for me. So for people that are just getting started, I'm with it. But if you want to talk about specific what led to this big launch, we can go into that a little bit if you like.
Yeah, I'd really like to nail down. It seems like you have gotten this down to a science here. And I really want to push you a little bit in terms of what is working for you right now, whether that's your campaign or even the strategies that people can use and apply to start raising some of these larger sums. How are you doing it?
Yeah, and the science thing is pretty funny because I'm working with a group of creators now and sort of trying to turn the art and the science of this into a step-by-step process. And so I have creators that are launching alongside of me right now that were in the course that I taught in January. But one of the things I just drilled down to them a lot is that Kickstarter is more math than magic, and so the key to a bigger launch is a bigger pre-launch. And so, but I do think, and it is important to say, and I want to give proper credit where credit is due, specifically for this latest project, to the team, because it all does start with a great product, and a great, in this case, a great book for a great market. So the team that I'm working with on this particular book launch, and anybody that wants to check it out, you can just go to Sweet Dreams Cthulhu. Try spelling Cthulhu if you can't. It's like if you can spell Cthulhu, the book is for you already, right? But so it starts with a great book. It starts with a great product. And so Jason Charamella spent a lot of time just analyzing and breaking down what makes the perfect bedtime story. And then he's also somebody with legit Lovecraft mythos chops and a deep understanding of that world that he's playing in. And then Greg Murphy is a just super talented illustrator and, created essentially what I believe is the best looking children's book, fully painted, digital illustrated. I mean, most children's books, if you've been to the shelves, like they don't look like this. They haven't and that's because the artist doesn't take the amount of time that he takes and the amount of sort of care and TLC. And so combine those two things with the team is that we made a really great book itself.
So another thing that you've put in all of this work to make a product that people love. You've put in the work to make something with care that people are going to appreciate, that's going to really make them light up, something that they enjoy, etc. If your sort of role, I guess, in this process is the marketing, are you then, in terms of that pre-launch, it's a word we also throw around, what are you doing during that phase?
Yeah. So for the pre-launch for this, and I was thinking about this the other day when it comes to pre-launch, is that whether you're talking about like a campaign that literally raises $0 and is a total flop, or a campaign that raises millions of dollars, and everything in between, every campaign that launches starts the exact same way, right? It starts with, on Kickstarter, it starts with clicking that green launch button, right? Mm-hmm. But then after that happens, the results are different. And what's cool about Kickstarter is that you can see, it's very transparent. You can go back and research what other campaigns have done and what their page looks like. And you can see a tremendous amount of information, but you don't see what they did before they actually hit that green button. And I don't know if you ever had a BB gun or an air rifle coming up, but the number of times that you pump the air rifle.
Oh yeah.
It's the same effort to pull that trigger, but you pump it once and somebody hits you with it. It's just going to smart a little bit. You pump it 5 times, it's breaking skin, right? Mm-hmm. And so it's sort of like that with hitting that launch. And so to give a specific, just sort of actionable things that those of you guys that are planning your pre-launch, here's 3 things that we did for the Sweet Dreams Cthulhu pre-launch that seem to have worked out incredibly well for us. And the key with the pre-launch for me is we want to do 2 things. We want to wake up, energize, and build into raving, rabid, frothing fans our existing fan base, and then we want to use that enthusiasm to attract additional people that are like our existing fan base, and we want to and we want to be able to put the message of the campaign in front of them once the campaign goes live, and so that's sort of the 2 things. We want to engage our existing fans, and we want to grow that base before we ever launch. And so we created 3 new pieces of content for this launch. I'm going to call them, for the sake of the 3 pieces are a watch magnet is what I'm going to call it. The second is a lead magnet, and the third would be a viral giveaway. Now, for the watch magnet, this is basically just a video, right? We're living in a time where video is really the dominant form of art and consumption thing that people watch. What are they doing on Facebook? They're watching video. On YouTube, they're watching video. On Instagram, video, etc. And so videos are just really good. It conveys a lot of information in a short period of time. It's when done right, it can attract the eyeballs, attracts the right kind of attention. And what's also great is that then you can build audiences from video, and you can retarget those audiences. And so for the Sweet Dreams Cthulhu, we actually reached out to our existing audience. And again, we've been putting out, we've done a campaign each year for the last 3 years. So this is our fourth year. So we already have a decent size existing audience. That said, this campaign was 3 times the size of any of our previous best days on Kickstarter. So this was special. But so we created a video, and we asked our fan base to submit videos of their kids saying "C is for Cthulhu" or Cthulhu, because it's funny hearing kids say the word Cthulhu, and most of them butcher it. And so we got about 10 videos of kids saying Cthulhu, including one that was dressed in as Batman, which was great. and a lot of them were also holding our book or holding their plush toy or the merchandise for it. And then we spliced those videos in with just like over 100 images of our fans that they've shared on our Facebook page or shared on Instagram, et cetera, just with our products. And then at the very end of that video, included just a little teaser about the new book. And then, and so we shared that video with our existing audience, and then we started running Facebook ads to that video.
Very cool.
So that's the watch magnet. And that's really, it's about showing how far we've come as a brand. It's providing social proof that, hey, we've delivered over the past couple campaigns and people love our stuff. It celebrates and validates our existing fans, and it also teases the new book. And so that was the first piece. Second piece is the lead magnet, which is essentially we put together a 15-page preview of the new book, which is about half the new book, plus some back matter. Jason Charamella wrote a nice essay about why this book means so much to him. Greg Murphy did a process piece about how he makes the art, and we collected that as a PDF, which we traded for an email address. And then we promoted that and tried to give away as many of those books as we possibly could. In exchange for an email address. And then the third.
Let me just ask you a question really quickly there. So how are you doing that? Were you using something like a software tool to be able to collect these email addresses? Was this your homepage of your website? Where were you sending people?
Yeah. So the tool that I use for my these are called lead magnets or opt-in magnets. The tool I use is called ClickFunnels, and you can it's essentially a website builder, landing page builder that's optimized for this kind of stuff. And it and what it also does is lets once we collect that email, I've built a follow-up email sequence inside a tool that I use called ConvertKit. You can actually use ClickFunnels to do your autoresponder sequence as well. But I just prefer ConvertKit and prefer writing in emails in that tool. And so these are sort of two tools that we're using in order to facilitate this transaction, because the reality is not all landing pages are created the same. Not all like you can put it
a lot easier, I imagine, and optimizes it. When you are doing that autoresponder sequence, is this something you're sending out like once a week? Is this like saying, hey, did you get the PDF? Like, what are you saying in that sequence?
Yeah. So a couple things. So here's the journey that someone will come on. They will come, let's say they see an ad on Facebook, okay, to get this, to download the preview book. So they'll go from Facebook and then they'll jump in and go to a page. And the only thing for them to do on that page is two things. They can either choose to give me an email address in exchange for that preview book, or they can leave. There's not a link to my blog. There's not a link to a dozen blog posts. There's not a link to the store. There's just one choice. And what happens is when you give the people just one choice, they have a decision to make. And what we've found, and ClickFunnels makes it really easy to track this, is that 33% of the people that hit that page said, you know what? This looks really good. I want to see that preview book. Here's my email. Here is my email address. And so once they give us that, the first email they get is going to be, hey, here's that book that you asked for, and we give it to them. And then we follow up because and I'm sure you've had this experience, like we always follow up, and so much of the power of this kind of stuff is actually in the follow-up. And so we will follow up to make sure that they got the download and make sure that was all okay. And then we expanded a little bit on some of the content that was in the download and just said, hey, here's why this book is so important to us, and here's why we think it's cool. And then we followed up a couple days later asking for some feedback about the book itself.
Ooh, that's cool.
And what ended up happening there is for the past week, and part of the reason why, I mean, we're grateful, we're humble, we're excited about how well this launch went, but we're not terribly surprised, is because we've had over 100 people reply to us and say what it is that they love about the preview book already. And so we really have a good idea about who it is we're serving. And there's a book that I think you would actually love, Sal. It's actually by Russell Brunson, who is actually the creator of ClickFunnels. But it's a book called Expert Secrets. And he talks about, when you're choosing a market for who you want to serve, who you want to entertain, it's always best if you can find a market that is irrationally passionate about the subject matter that you're dealing in. Mm-hmm. And I can tell you with that this sort of sub-market of a sub-market or niche of a niche of parents who love H.P. Lovecraft and love horror, they are irrationally passionate about this stuff. They love it. And when you have a market that is, that loves that stuff, they love to talk about it, they love to share it, and they love to spread it. And so our biggest marketing effort, even though we juice it with some Facebook ads, we juice it with creating some content, but word of mouth still is our absolute best source of referrals and expanding the audience that we've built.
I think that is just so vital, because it's one thing to assume that you know what people want, and a lot of people do that and they launch a product and no one buys it. But it seems like what you're doing is you're actually initially first forming a bit of a relationship with the customer, and then you're also asking them for feedback, getting inside their head a little bit. And if they say they like one thing, not another, to focus on that more. Or when you do a Facebook ad, okay, this is what I'm going to emphasize, or this is what I'm going to focus. And it's like you're learning more and more about these people that you're trying to serve with this whole email marketing chain. Is this something you start like the week before the campaign? Do you start this a month before? When do you start doing this? I'm speaking to the crowdfunders in the audience who have already launched a Kickstarter campaign, or have actually even successfully run a campaign. And the reason is, I think you will understand this pain point most. And that is, when you finally do raise money on Kickstarter or IndieGoGo, the hardest part is not collecting the cash. The hardest part is shipping out all of those perks and rewards to your backers. It is a nightmare, my friends. It's a lot of spreadsheets, it's a lot of headache, and it's a lot of stress. That's why I recommend BackerKit. If you have not heard of BackerKit, they help you collect surveys, they help you collect data, and the entire fulfillment process is just so much easier and so many less spreadsheets when you use their software. You can check them out at backerkit.com and use CrowdCrux for a special discount.
So I never started early enough is the truth. Now, we've been building over time. We've been building an audience and email list. And so I don't always get to do it, but I try to send them something from us at least once a week. But usually it's more like two to three emails a month that they'll hear from the C is for Cthulhu brand. And sometimes we're surveying them about a new product idea. The reason our last product was a coloring book, which was actually our biggest launch. It looks like this one's, knock on wood, is going to blow that one out of the water. But our biggest launch ever was the last project we did, which was a coloring book version of the original board book. And but the reason we knew that was a good product to launch is that we created about half a dozen coloring pages and just gave them for free to our audience. and waited to see if they started coloring them and posting and sharing them. And once they did, and once we saw that they were downloading them and that people were posting them to our Facebook page, we're like, okay, our audience wants this. Our audience will dig this. And so that's a great idea to launch to launch for a future product. And that's, the brilliant thing about building an audience and being clear about who you're serving is that then you don't need to create in the dark. You can co-create with your audience. And so, in the past, we launched these plush toys. The reason we got the idea for a plush toy was, well, our audience was asking for it. And one of the things that was a great decision now looking back at it is they were asking for a plush toy in our very first campaign. And we were like toying with the idea of adding one, but we had never done a plush toy before.
No pun intended.
Yeah, exactly.
What I love so much about that too is it is such in the spirit of Kickstarter, because Kickstarter is co-creation. You're creating something with your audience, and because they want it to exist in the world, it is going to exist, and you're also doing your part, fulfilling the rewards, etc. But even with the pre-launch, you're co-creating with the audience, and that is just so cool to me. If I was listening to this podcast, I'd be thinking like, wow, this sounds really cool, but it's also a lot to do. So if people are interested in this program that you were talking about, where you sort of hold their hand and help them along this journey, where can they find out more information about that?
Yeah, so I mean, the best thing to do would just be, I imagine most people listen to this on their phones, is just open up your podcast app and search for Comics Launch. That's COMIX Launch, one word, and add it to your queue. Subscribe to that podcast because I will, and we actually just finished up Audience Building Month on the podcast, or actually I guess April's not over, depending upon when people are listening to it. But April was Audience Building Month. So we just did a series of episodes all about how to grow an audience, how to excite an audience, how to warm an audience. And I go into even more depth on sort of this pre-launch strategy, as well as over the past month. I mean, we've talked to people about how to use Instagram to grow and launch on Kickstarter. How do you get help growing your audience, and other strategies. So I think the place to start is just download the podcast. But 3 times a year, I do open up the Comics Launch course, which is for primarily writers, artists, and self-publishers looking to harness the Kickstarter platform and really plan their launches alongside of me. That's at comicslaunch.com/course. You can get on the advanced notification list for that. But one piece of advice I'd give to people that I think is so important is don't launch alone. I talked about how so many people in my audience have, still haven't pulled the trigger on their first Kickstarter launch. And the reason for that is fear. Fear is holding them back. But even those that do launch, so many tell me that they're an emotional wreck during the whole campaign. It feels lonely running a Kickstarter campaign. I know creators that have been hospitalized because of the stress of running their Kickstarter campaign. And the truth is, it's a lot to take on. But if you can do it when you're not alone, when you have people that are going side by side it can make all the difference in the world in your launch. So even if that's just reaching out to another creative friend who has a project they're working on and say, hey, let's be accountability partners, it makes the world of difference in your launches. But also what I've found is with the Comics Launch course anyway, is that, sort of doing and building this campaign step by step, side by side with other creators, it makes it so you realize that you're not alone, and then you've got people that know about your campaign and are rooting for you as well, and so that's very powerful, and it's something that you can't get from a book or a blog post,
Exactly. So, especially if you live in a place in the world where there aren't a lot of other people who are doing things, whether it's creative or artistic or even entrepreneurial, it can feel really lonely. I'm really privileged in New York. Lots and lots of people are doing different creative things, etc. And it sort of motivates me when I meet people doing different things. But if you are alone, you can still access that type of community online. You just have to hop out there and you have to explore and make new connections, etc. I do just have two more questions for you here. The first one is, have you managed to figure out how to get past the Kickstarter slump of death?
The dead zone, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, the way I look at it is Kickstarter, like there's Kickstarter physics at play, right? And so you need to sort of embrace that as just a fact of Kickstarter life. And so you're going to,
so it's normal. Yeah.
So it's normal. And the fun thing is that you can take a $1,000 project and you can take one of the biggest projects of all time, and you're still going to see, a Death Valley in the center. Now, that for the biggest projects, that Death Valley, usually also means thousands of dollars instead of tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars. So it's it is different. But the thing that is super important, and this is the thing. I'm not going to say it's going to wash away the death zone or the Death Valley or the dead zone, but it will make it more manageable, and is keeping a daily Kickstarter launch journal. Because psychologically, we tend to remember only the beginning and the end of things, right? You probably remember freshman year and senior year of college more so than anything in the beginning. You remember the beginning and the ends of movies more so than what happens in the middle. And the Kickstarter is the same. And this can trick you, especially people that come back and launch Kickstarter, because what for their last campaign. I have a creator right now who just launched her second campaign. She was in the course last year with me. Her first campaign was very successful, and now she's sort of in the dead zone right now, and she's getting a little nervous. And what I'm telling her is, you forget about raising that 30% of your total funding in that last 48 to 72 hours, which you totally forgot about that. But you're on track. You're doing right. It's just about keeping moving forward and doing something every single day to move things forward, and also to maintain a sense of gratitude. This is another thing, and people that haven't launched yet, they'll think you're crazy, but it happens to everyone, is that you can quickly normalize people giving you, like, dozens or even hundreds of people a day giving you money, such that when now only 5 or 6 people a day are giving you money, you're feeling,
oh man, only 5 or 6.
Yeah. It's amazing how that happens. And the only way to stop yourself from doing that sort of, self-defeating stuff is to remember to be grateful every single day. And so that's why I like to keep a journal for every campaign, what I'm doing, what's the number one thing I need to do today to move my campaign forward, track my metrics, and just see that every single day, even if it's a small step, you're still moving forward. And even if it's a negative step, because that happens sometimes. I had one of the creators I was working with, he just had a $250 backer that he was a little suspect on anyway, just completely dropped on him, which took him below one of his stretch goals. Very disappointing. But I just said, hey, stay the course, keep grinding, keep going forward, and be grateful, because, you're getting to play this game, and it's a fun game to play, and ultimately you're going to be successful.
Well, sir, you have come a long way since your early days, and you really stand out, I think, a lot in that a lot of different creative types and comic book creators are great on the creative side, but they don't know where to begin when it actually comes to marketing their campaign, or it actually comes to the numbers or managing their work. And to see that you have actually been able to master sort of both sides of that, I think that's really commendable. So I just wanted to say that really quickly. But the last question that I have for you here is, you've interviewed lots of different entrepreneurs, you've spoken with lots of different crowdfunding creators, etc. What is the one question that you wished I asked you, or a question that you think is not asked enough in this community?
Ooh, that's a great question. I guess one thing might be how would you like to see these platforms evolve? What could they be? What could they be doing better? And because as awesome as Kickstarter is, and as awesome as the world is, it can always be better. We can always be making it a little bit better. And so maybe that's one question I like.
Yeah, I mean, that's something I'm certainly seeing. Some platforms are making an effort, obviously, to add in new functionality, et cetera, like Kickstarter trying with live streaming kind of deal. But I do see definitely in the future lots of opportunity out there, and I have no idea what these platforms are going to do. It does seem like Kickstarter is a little bit more hesitant about innovation in some ways than IndieGoGo has been historically. I mean, IndieGoGo is just like adding lots and lots of functionality. And this is sort of like crowdfunding nerd talk right now, but it's something really exciting to watch. Well, man, thank you so much for coming on the podcast and sharing some of these tips. I'll definitely urge everyone to check out your podcast, and especially if they're interested in comic books, if they're more creative types, if they're looking to have that accountability partner as they're going into an upcoming campaign, or even if they're looking to launch their second campaign, they're aware of how stressful it is, the first one, and how lonely it can feel. I think that accountability partner and that community just makes all of the difference.
Well, thanks so much for having me, Sal, and we'll definitely have to have you on the Comics Launch show as well.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Crowdfunding Demystified podcast. Again, my name is Salvador Brigman, and if you do want to learn how to smash your goal on Kickstarter, and also how to get in the media, how to get journalists buzzing about you, how to have reporters writing about you and just banging on your door, you can go and check out my free online course at crowdcrux.com/PR. That is crowdcrux.com/PR, and I'll start sending you some training videos to sort of get you up to speed on the best ways not only market your campaign to get more backers, etc., but also to get into the media. I hope you enjoyed this podcast episode. Hit that subscribe button if you do want to get more episodes, you want them automatically downloaded, and I will see you next time.